So hi and welcome everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to Navigating Grief. Each person that we come into contact with has a ripple effect on our lives. And when we experience loss, that ripple effect can be long-reaching and actually quite difficult for us to bear alone. The process of grieving is not easy. It never is, but it's a natural response to loss. It's individual and it's unique. And it happens that way every time that we experience grief. You know, you may have been told that there's a right way or a wrong way, and I'm going to disagree with that. There is no right way to grieve. There's also no wrong way to grieve. So whether you're joining me to help yourself through the process or to support a loved one who is grieving, I welcome you. And I admire your courage in being here. If we haven't met before, I'm Laura Summers. I'm a certified master life coach, and I'm passionate about working one-on-one and in coaching groups, guiding people to overcome core issues and develop personal action plans so that they can move effectively toward achieving their goals and living the lives that they were always meant to live. I'm also a certified Canfield Success Principles trainer. I'm teaching 67 success principles that really help to get you from where you are to where you want to be. You know, success is different for everyone. For one person, success might be reaching a business goal or making a lot of money. Whereas for another person, it might be finding peace in their lives or developing a strong relationship with a loved one or strong relationships with family members. Regardless of what success looks like to you, it is achievable. And, well, I'm here to show you how. You know, the pain of loss can be overwhelming. Many difficult and unexpected emotions can arise, from shock or anger to disbelief and guilt, and even profound sadness. Learning to cope with the loss of someone or something that you love is one of life's biggest challenges, which is why I'm glad that you're taking this step, because you don't have to go through grief alone. So this is my dad, Julian. He also went by Al or Albert, which was his middle name, and sometimes by Bertie, or to his nieces and nephews, Uncle Bertie. He and my mom were my first experiences with profound love and my first experiences with deep grief. I was 13 when my dad died in an airplane crash. He was a private pilot. He loved flying. It truly was his passion. As a self-proclaimed daddy's girl, I would often fly with him. In fact, he bought me my first logbook for recording the hours that I flew as his co-pilot and then as pilot myself. Although I haven't seen that book since he died, I still remember its brown leather cover with my name embossed in gold letters in the bottom right-hand corner. At the age of 38, he received an instrument rating certification. And what that means is that qualified him as trained in flying in adverse conditions like fog and heavy clouds, inclement weather. Soon after his certification came through, he had his first opportunity to fly under those conditions. Years after the crash, in fact, just a few years ago, I finally decided to search for the National Transportation Safety Board's crash report. When I got it in the mail, I was surprised it didn't match the stories that I was told as a girl about what caused the crash. The story that I was told was that he had likely had a heart attack and that caused the crash. And I believe that that story was told to me so that I wouldn't think that my father had done anything that would have caused the accident. But that story had me believing that had I just been with him in the airplane, I could have landed it safely and maybe saved his life. The NTSB report summed it up like this. Pilot made an uncontrolled descent resulting in a collision with the ground. Conditions at the crash site were overcast with a ceiling of 300 feet. Visibility was less than 1/2 mile with heavy fog and drizzle. Pilot attempted operation beyond experience and/or ability level and became spatially disoriented. Pilot's log showed no actual instrument time. All I know is my dad had died. His death changed the course of my life. I was lost. I was angry. I was angry at him. I was angry at the world for taking him. And I felt like God hated me, or maybe just forgot I existed. And I carried extreme guilt in not being there to save his life. My mom didn't know how to help me. She was in deep grief herself, and I imagine a little scared to find herself a 35-year-old widow with 4 children, ages 13 and under. Meet my mom, Anne. She was a beautiful soul with a bright smile to match. She loved her daughters and taught us to be strong, independent, and resilient young women. 2 years after my dad died, she remarried. That marriage was another source of grief for me. I strongly disliked my stepfather. The feeling, however, was mutual, likely because, like today, I was a little vocal and direct. 15 months after they married, she told me it wasn't what she had hoped for and she would be filing for divorce. But just days after this revelation, she suffered a brain aneurysm, and a week later, she died in the recovery room after brain surgery. I stood by her bedside holding her hand. I was 16. My life would never be the same. Yes, death in many cases causes profound grief. Death of a parent, a spouse, a child, or a sibling. Death of a friend or a grandparent, an auntie or an uncle. But any type of loss can cause feelings of grief, including divorce or a relationship breakup, a serious illness, loss of your health, losing a job, loss of financial stability, a miscarriage, retirement, death of a pet, loss of a cherished dream, a loved one's serious illness, loss of a friendship, loss of safety, trauma, an accident that changes your life, selling the family home, or having to move from a beloved community, or even, as I shared, having a parent remarry. The process of grieving is a highly individual experience. Many factors come into play when grieving, such as your personality and your coping style, as well as your age and your life experience. Your faith will have a great deal to do with your grieving style, as well as whether or not your belief system offers support that is comforting and right for you. Also, you can factor in how significant the loss was to you. You may, for instance, grieve differently with the loss of a loved one than you do with the loss of a beloved pet. You may grieve differently with the loss of one sibling than you do with the loss of another. No one can tell you how you should grieve. There is no right way. There is no wrong way. There is no normal way to grieve. Your process is your own. Let's look at the 5 common stages of grief, keeping in mind that these stages may or may not apply to you as, well, like I just said, all grief is different. Stage 1 is denial. Like with all stages of grief, denial is a normal stage. We all process events and situations differently and at different speeds. Denial allows us to minimize the overwhelming pain of loss. You see, reality shifts dramatically when we experience profound losses. Through the stage of denial, some people are better able to absorb and understand what is happening, and they're able to do so at their own pace. Denial attempts to slow this process down and take us through it one step at a time, rather than risk the potential of feeling overwhelmed by our emotions. Stage 2 is anger. Anger is a common emotion evoked after a loss. The anger I felt, for instance, after the death of my dad, took me years to actually understand and to learn to accept. I was deeply angry with him for leaving me and for changing my life as I knew it. And some of my anger was disguised as guilt. Adjusting to a new reality can be frustrating and cause extreme emotional discomfort. Anger is often the first thing that we feel when we start to release the emotions that are related to loss. You should be concerned about staying in this stage for too long. Anger or repressed anger can have adverse health effects. Anger causes stress in the body, which can weaken the immune system, as well as release high levels of stress hormones that can lead to chronic health conditions. Stage 3 is bargaining. When coping with loss, many people experience feelings of desperation, wishing and wanting things to be different so badly that we're willing to try and make deals with God and the universe. This can lead to a willingness to do almost anything to alleviate or minimize the pain that we're feeling. Bargaining can come in a variety of promises. You may find yourself saying things like, I promise to be better if blank, or I'll turn my life around if only blank, or I'll never get angry again if blank. So recalling things from the past that we regret, or things that we did not mean to say or to do, that's also common during the bargaining stage. Stage 4 is depression. There typically comes a time when our thoughts begin to calm down and we slowly start to look at the reality of our current situation. As the feeling of loss becomes more apparent, panic begins to subside. The emotional fog begins to clear, and the loss feels more present, more real, and unavoidable. Although this is a very natural stage of grief, dealing with depression after the loss of a loved one can be extremely isolating. Know that there are many outlets for coping with depression. Now is the time to reach out for help. Remember that friend or family member who asked what they could do for you when the loss happened and changed your world? Now is the time to reach out and tell them how they can help you. From talk therapy, or just a compassionate ear to listen to you, or physical activity, something as simple as getting outside for a walk in the fresh air. There are many ways to process your depression in a healthy way. Stage 5 is acceptance. The stage of acceptance does not mean the feelings of pain and loss disappear. I wish they did. Instead, acceptance means that we are no longer resisting the reality of our situation. We're no longer struggling to make it something different than what it is. Instead, acceptance is being able to acknowledge and be with the facts of what is true in our present circumstances. During the stage of acceptance, the emotional survival tactics of denial and bargaining and anger move over a little. They're less likely to be present, or at least not as prevalent. So anyone who has lived will experience grief in one form or another throughout their lives. Some have tried to help us to feel a little bit less alone in our grief with comforting words. So these are some of the inspiring words that I have found that have brought me a sense of peace. And I'm hoping that they might help you too. So I thought I'd share. What we have once enjoyed deeply, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us. Helen Keller. No person is ever truly alone. Those who live no more, whom we've loved, echo still within our thoughts, our words, and our hearts. Remember that everyone you meet is afraid of something, loves something, and has lost something. Life seems sometimes like nothing more than a series of losses from beginning to end. That's the given. How you respond to those losses, what you make of what's left, that's the part you have to make up as you go along. Catherine Weber. I'd like to spend the remainder of our time together discussing strategies for coping with grief. To start with, It's important to take time to care for your personal, emotional, and mental needs. Reach out for help when you feel the need. In many ways, the experience of grief is similar to recovering from a serious illness. You'll undoubtedly experience darker days, just as you'll experience brighter days. Try to recognize and honor your personal boundaries and your limits. Separate the things that must be done from those things that can wait. And remember that delegating tasks to those who want to help will give them a sense of purpose. Don't spend too much time stressing about keeping up with your usual schedule. If you have to cancel or reschedule commitments, people really will understand. Just don't cut yourself off entirely. In times of grief, it can be difficult to see beyond our own pain. Grief can cloud your judgment, causing impulsive and often regrettable decisions. Making life-changing decisions, like to move or change a job, for example, can have far-reaching implications, some of which you may be very unprepared for. If you find yourself in a situation where a decision absolutely must be made, I encourage you, don't do it alone. Discuss your options with someone that you trust, like a close friend, an advisor, or a family member. Better yet, if you can delay the decision until a later date and just allow it to sit on the back burner until you feel better able to make the decision, do that. And the decision will then be made with more confidence and clarity. Bottling up your feelings and trying to appear strong and as though you can handle it just fine, well, that can adversely affect your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. Sharing your feelings is a normal part of the healing process, and it's okay to take your time. Don't force yourself or allow anyone else to force you into talking when you're not ready. And when you are ready, if you think you need more than the support of your dear friends and loved ones, consider talking with a professional counselor. Grief counselors can walk you through your individual and unique process. Expressing yourself in any way can be healing. Even if you don't consider yourself to be a creative person, there are many outlets to choose from. Try keeping a journal or writing letters that are just for you. If words aren't your thing, try some artistic outlets like painting or drawing or sculpting to help you to communicate what is in your heart and in your soul. Dancing and even gardening can be forms of creatively expressing yourself. Even working on a car, building a bookshelf, or redecorating a room, or cleaning out a closet, or cleaning out a junk drawer. Those things can be helpful too. Be creative with your creative outlet. When experiencing the grief of a lost loved one, preserving your memories in ways that are comforting and meaningful can be helpful. Focus on the good times that you've shared. Print photos to be framed. Create a shadow box of treasured pieces and pictures, or compile a scrapbook of letters and mementos from the good times that you've shared. Consider making a quilt or a stuffed animal from their clothing, or plant a tree or a garden to create a lasting and growing tribute. And maybe host a dinner in their honor and just exchange stories with others that are loved ones and share the memories together. Not only does grief take an emotional toll, but a physical one as well. Rest, exercise, and proper nutrition, well, they're essential to life, but they're also essential to healing. Poor appetite is common among the bereaved. Counter it by eating small amounts of healthy food rather than large meals. Allow yourself to take naps. If you're having difficulty sleeping at night, that might be a particularly good thing to do. Physical activity may be the last thing that you want to do when you're grieving, but allow yourself permission to go ahead and skip those heavy workouts, but instead, maybe take the dog for a walk, go around the block, invite a friend to join you. Be mindful of how much and how often you're reaching for that bottle of wine. While for some, a glass now and then might help settle nerves, Overdoing it can bring a host of new problems. The desire to numb your feelings with alcohol, illicit drugs, or prescription medications will only prolong the pain and create new issues. Eventually, you must come to terms with your grief. You have the choice to do so in a healthy way. If you can't cope with feelings on your own, there's no shame in seeking professional help. It actually is an honorable way to hold someone in your heart. And grieving doesn't mean that you have to feel bad all the time. There's no set time to grieve. In 19th century England, it was common thought that a widow must grieve and wear black for 2 years after the death of her spouse. Well, it's obviously not the case today, and it's okay. It's healthy even to take a break from focusing on your grief. Whether it's reading a good book or watching a movie, maybe playing cards or laughing with friends, or just resuming other activities that you enjoyed before the loss affected your life. Don't feel guilty about having a little fun. Special dates such as anniversaries and birthdays, death dates and holidays can be stressful when you've lost a loved one. Use this time to celebrate the person that you've lost. Recently, I posted on Facebook a tribute with a couple of fun photos of my mom on what would have been her 83rd birthday. It was my way to celebrate her, to remember her, and honor her in a public way. If you're struggling with a specific tradition, talk with family members about your concerns. And if you're up for it, you may want to use this time to create and introduce some new traditions to mark these special occasions. It's common to feel the need to withdraw or to isolate at the beginning of grief. Just don't let this stage last too long because, well, we humans are social creatures. Try making a date with an old friend or inviting a neighbor or a new friend to lunch. If you're up for it, share your talents by volunteering in your community. You'll make new social contacts while you're helping others. And being in service to others will always find a way to make you feel good about yourself. Knowing what to say to someone experiencing grief can be difficult. It's really hard seeing a loved one in pain. And while we do our best to offer support, it can still sometimes feel inadequate. So here's a few tips that might help. First, be wary of offering uplifting advice, hopeful comments, and even offering humor as a way to help ease the pain. This can leave people feeling as if their pain is not seen or heard or is valid. And don't force others to talk when they're not ready. Instead, just offer space while you're making yourself accessible. Make it clear that you're there. You're there just in case you're needed. Flowers and quick visits, food and phone calls and cards are a way to let those grieving know that they're not alone and to know that you care. Remember that once a little time has gone by, to continue your interaction. It's at that time when services are over and everyone goes back to their normal lives that reality can really set in. And those grieving may now need your love and companionship more than ever. And sometimes just sitting in silence with someone who is grieving is what's really needed. It might feel awkward at first, but sitting together may be all they need right now to just not feel alone and isolated. Thank you so much for taking this time to join me today in navigating grief. I hope you learned some helpful tips for dealing with your grief or the grief of someone that you love. Please feel free to email your questions or comments to me at lauraesummers.com. You can take a screenshot of this screen just so that you don't forget the email address. And you can visit my website too at www.lauraesummers.com. And if you know of someone who you feel might benefit from this webinar, please email me their contact information or have them email me and I'll make sure that they get a replay of this webinar. All webinars are always free and they're always available anytime you need to revisit them. If you ever need help handling your grief, I hope you'll feel comfortable reaching out to me. I'm always here. Together, we can accomplish anything.